The blood-red sunset painted the horizon as Savannah Ross stood alone on the dusty road leading into Wilson, Wyoming Territory, 1876. Her tattered dress hung from her slim frame, evidence of the arduous 3-day journey she had endured. The stagecoach had abandoned her 10 miles outside of town after an axle broke, the other passengers hitching rides with passing travelers. No one had offered her a place, not with her reputation preceding her. Savannah wiped the dust from her face, leaving streaks of dirt across her high cheekbones. Her honey blonde hair, once neatly pinned, now fell in loose tendrils around her shoulders. The letter from her dying aunt, her last living relative, had brought her to this God-forsaken place. A homestead, supposedly hers by inheritance, if she could claim it before the vultures descended. The distant sound of hoofbeats made her turn. A lone rider approached, his silhouette growing larger against the darkening sky. Savannah tensed, her hand instinctively moving to the small knife concealed in her boot, the one lesson her father had taught her before the consumption took him. The rider slowed his chestnut stallion to a walk as he neared. Broad-shouldered and lean-hipped, he wore dusty denim, a worn leather vest, and a hat pulled low over his eyes. "Madam," he said, tipping his hat to reveal a face weathered by sun and wind, yet still youthful. No more than 30, she guessed. His eyes, a startling shade of blue, assessed her with quiet intensity. "You look like you could use some assistance." Savannah straightened her spine, pride overriding exhaustion. "I'm perfectly fine, sir." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. 10 miles is a fair distance to walk in those boots. How did you pass the stagecoach a ways back? Driver mentioned a lady passenger continuing on foot. He swung down from his saddle with easy grace. "Yates Xavier's the name. Most folks just call me Yates." "Savannah Ross," she replied cautiously. "Where you headed, Miss Ross?" "Wilson," he nodded. "That's my destination as well. I'd be honored to offer you a ride." Savannah hesitated. Men's offers rarely came without expectations. Yates seemed to read her thoughts. "You have my word as a gentleman, Miss Ross. I'll deliver you safely to town. Nothing more." Something in his steady gaze made her believe him. Besides, walking another 10 miles in the approaching darkness seemed increasingly foolish. "Very well, Mr. Xavier." He helped her mount, his hands respectful as he boosted her onto his horse. Then he swung up behind her, maintaining a proper distance between them. "What brings you to Wilson?" he asked as the horse began a steady trot. "My aunt passed, left me her homestead." Savannah saw no reason to lie. "What about you?" "I've got a small ranch outside town, been away on business." He fell silent for a moment. "Your aunt, would that be Alina Ross?" Savannah twisted to look at him. "Yes, did you know her?" Everyone knew Miss Alina. There was respect in his voice. "Tough as nails but fair. One of the first women to stake a claim in these parts. I'm sorry for your loss." The sincerity in his words surprised her. "Thank you. Though I barely knew her, she and my father had a falling out before I was born." "Family complications," Yates murmured, "seem to follow us all." As they rode, the vast Wyoming landscape stretched before them, bathed in the last light of day. Mountain peaks stood sentinel in the distance, their snow-capped tops glowing pink in the dying sun. "It's beautiful," Savannah whispered, momentarily forgetting her troubles. "That it is." "Different from where you're from, I imagine." "St. Louis." The word felt bitter on her tongue. "Very different." Yates didn't press, and Savannah was grateful. The scandal that had driven her from her hometown was still too raw, too painful to discuss with a stranger, no matter how unexpectedly kind he seemed. As they crested a hill, the lights of Wilson came into view, a small collection of buildings nestled in the valley below. Savannah felt a curious mixture of dread and hope. Would this place be her sanctuary or just another stop in a life that had become a constant flight? "Almost there," Yates said. "You have somewhere to stay tonight. I'll find somewhere." Savannah hoped her voice conveyed more confidence than she felt. "Town's got a decent hotel. The owner, Mrs. Holloway, is particular about who she rents to, but mention my name. She'll give you a fair price." They rode into Wilson as the last light faded from the sky. The main street was quieter than Savannah had expected. Just a few patrons entering the saloon and a couple of cowboys tying their horses outside the general store. Yates guided his horse to stop in front of a two-story building with a sign reading, "Holloway Hotel." He dismounted first, then reached up to help Savannah down. His hands were strong and calloused but gentle. "Thank you, Mr. Xavier," she said formally once her feet touched the ground. "Yates," he corrected with a small smile. "And you're welcome, Miss Ross." "Savannah," she responded, surprising herself. "Savannah," he repeated, her name sounding different in his deep voice. "Welcome to Wilson." He hesitated. "If you need any assistance with your aunt's property, I'd be happy to help. My ranch borders the eastern edge of her homestead." "I appreciate the offer." Savannah studied him, wondering at his motives. Men didn't offer help without wanting something in return. That was a lesson harshly learned. As if sensing her thoughts, Yates stepped back, giving her space. "Good night, Savannah. I hope Wilson treats you kindly." He tipped his hat, mounted his horse, and rode away without looking back. Savannah watched him go, a curious feeling in her chest. Then, squaring her shoulders, she turned to face the hotel and whatever awaited her in this new chapter of her life. The Holloway Hotel was clean but sparse, its lobby furnished with a worn settee and a desk behind which stood a stern-faced woman with iron-gray hair pulled into a tight bun. "Room for one night," Savannah said, placing her small purse on the counter. Mrs. Holloway's eyes narrowed. "We're full up." Yates Xavier suggested I mention his name. The change was immediate. The woman's expression softened slightly. "You know Yates. He was kind enough to give me a ride into town." Mrs. Holloway studied her for a long moment. "You'd be Alina Ross's niece, then?" News traveled fast in small towns. "Yes, madam. Your aunt was a good woman, stubborn as a mule but good-hearted." Mrs. Holloway reached for a key. "Room 3, top of the stairs. 50 cents a night, includes breakfast." Savannah counted out the coins carefully. Half her remaining money, but she had little choice. "Thank you," she said, taking the key. "Bathrooms down the hall. No gentlemen callers, no drinking, no loud noises after 9. Mrs. Holloway's tone brooked no argument. "Yes, madam." The room was tiny but clean. A narrow bed, a washstand, a small dresser, and a window overlooking the main street. Savannah set her carpetbag on the bed and sank down beside it, exhaustion finally overtaking her. Tomorrow she would visit the lawyer handling her aunt's estate. Tomorrow she would see if this inheritance was her salvation or just another dead end. Tomorrow she would begin again. But tonight, as she prepared for bed in a strange town far from everything she'd known, Savannah found her thoughts drifting to blue eyes and a gentle voice. To a man who'd helped her without demanding anything in return. Savannah woke to sunlight streaming through the thin curtains and the smell of coffee wafting up from below. Her body ached from the journey, but determination pushed her from the bed. After washing her face in the basin and changing into her second dress, a faded blue cotton that had once been quite fashionable, she made her way downstairs. The small dining room held 3 tables, only one occupied by an elderly couple who glanced at her briefly before returning to their breakfast. Mrs. Holloway emerged from the kitchen, a pot of coffee in hand. "Morning," she said briskly. "Eggs and biscuits today. Coffee's fresh." "Thank you." Savannah took a seat at an empty table. Could you direct me to Mr. Harrington's law office? I understand he handled my aunt's affairs." 3 doors down, across from the mercantile. Mrs. Holloway poured her coffee. "Best go early. He tends to indulge in whiskey by afternoon." Savannah nodded her thanks and ate quickly, eager to learn what exactly she had inherited. The biscuits were surprisingly good, warm and buttery. Whatever else Wilson lacked, Mrs. Holloway knew how to cook. Outside, the town looked different in daylight, more worn, more real. Wooden buildings lined the dusty main street, their facades weathered by harsh seasons. A few horses were hitched outside the general store, and a wagon loaded with lumber creaked past, driven by a man with a graying beard. Harrington's office was marked by a simple painted sign. Savannah smoothed her skirts and knocked on the door. "Enter," called a reedy voice. The lawyer was a thin man with spectacles and a receding hairline. His office smelled of paper and tobacco. He looked up from his desk with mild irritation that turned to interest when he saw her. "Can I help you, miss? I'm Savannah Ross, Elena Ross's niece." Recognition lit his face. "Ah, Miss Ross, I've been expecting you." He gestured to a chair. "Please sit. I was beginning to wonder if you'd received my letter. I came as soon as I could." Savannah sat carefully, her back straight. "What exactly did my aunt leave me?" Harrington shuffled through some papers. "The homestead, primarily. 160 acres, including the house and barn. A small sum in the bank, $342.16. Some livestock, 6 horses, a dozen cattle, and various chickens." He peered at her over his spectacles. "There are, however, complications." Of course there were. Nothing in Savannah's life came without complications. What sort of complications? "Your aunt's will stipulates that you must live on and work the land for a minimum of 1 year before full ownership transfers to you. If you fail to do so, the property reverts to the town for public use." Savannah frowned. "She didn't trust me to keep it." "I couldn't say," Harrington replied diplomatically. "Miss Elena was particular about her wishes. And if I refuse the inheritance, then the property goes to the town immediately." He shuffled his papers. "I should mention there have been several inquiries about purchasing the land, should you choose not to accept the terms." "Who's interested in buying?" Harrington hesitated. "Primarily the Western Railway Company. They're planning a line through the territory and have been acquiring land. They've made a generous offer, $800. It was a substantial sum, enough to start fresh somewhere else. But something about selling without even seeing the property felt wrong." "I'd like to visit the homestead before making any decisions," Savannah said. "Of course." Harrington nodded. "It's about 5 miles north of town. I can arrange for someone to take you there this afternoon." "That won't be necessary. I'll find my way." Harrington looked doubtful. "It's not an easy journey for a lady alone, Miss Ross." "I'm tougher than I look, Mr. Harrington." Savannah stood. "Is there anything else I should know? Just one thing." He handed her a sealed envelope. "Your aunt left this for you, said it was to be delivered only if you came in person." Savannah took the envelope, feeling the weight of it in her hands. "Thank you." Outside the office, she paused on the boardwalk, considering her options. She needed transportation to the homestead, and she needed supplies. The bank was her first stop, where she withdrew a modest sum from her aunt's account. Then the general store, where the proprietor, a heavy-set man named Jenkins, eyed her curiously as she purchased basic provisions. "You're Elena Ross's niece," he stated rather than asked as he tallied her purchases. "News travels fast," Savannah observed. Jenkins shrugged. "Small town, we don't get many newcomers." He wrapped her purchases in brown paper. "You planning to stay on at the homestead?" "I haven't decided." "Shame if you don't. Your aunt built something special there." He handed her the package. "Course, it's a hard life for anyone, especially a woman alone." Savannah bit back a sharp retort. She'd heard similar sentiments all her life: what women could and couldn't, should and shouldn't do. "I appreciate your concern," she said instead. "Now, I need to arrange transportation to the property. Is there someone who might rent me a horse? Livery's at the end of the street. Sam might rent you something, though his best horses are usually spoken for." Jenkins hesitated. "If you're heading out to the Ross place, you might want to wait until tomorrow. Storm's coming in from the mountains." Savannah glanced out the window. The sky was clear blue, no clouds in sight. Jenkins chuckled at her skepticism. "Weather changes fast here. Trust me, you don't want to be caught out when it turns." Reluctantly, Savannah acknowledged his advice might be sound. One more night at the hotel wouldn't ruin her plans. "Thank you," she said, gathering her purchases. As she stepped outside, a commotion down the street caught her attention. 3 men on horseback were riding in, dust billowing around them. Something about their manner, the way they sat their horses, the hardness in their postures, sent a prickle of unease down Savannah's spine. A man sweeping the boardwalk outside the barber shop paused, leaning on his broom as he watched the riders. "Trouble?" Savannah asked him. He spat tobacco juice into the street. "Railway men, been coming around regular, pressuring folks to sell." He gave her a sideways glance. "You being Miss Aliner's kin, they'll likely come calling on you soon enough." Savannah watched the men dismount outside the saloon. One of them, tall and expensively dressed, looked in her direction. Even from a distance, there was something cold in his gaze that made her shiver. She turned away, clutching her packages closer. The sooner she saw the homestead, the sooner she could make her decision. But first, she had an envelope to read. Back in her hotel room, Savannah sat on the bed and carefully broke the seal on her aunt's letter. The handwriting inside was neat but shaky, evidence of age or illness. "My dear Savannah," it began. "If you are reading this, then I have passed from this world, and you have chosen to at least consider my bequest. For this, I thank you. You do not know me, nor I you, but we are bound by blood and by something more, a spirit that I recognized in your father, my brother, and which I suspect flows in your veins as well. A refusal to be constrained by others' expectations. I left Missouri 50 years ago because I could not abide the life planned for me, marriage to a man I did not love, a lifetime of servitude disguised as security. I came west alone, claimed my land, and built my life as I saw fit. Many called me fool or worse. Some still do. But I have lived by my own choices, and I regret nothing. I know something of the circumstances that have brought you west. Small towns whisper, and whispers travel far. What others see as scandal, I recognize as courage. You chose freedom over security, truth over convenience. For this reason, I believe you may be the right person to continue what I began. The homestead is yours if you want it, truly want it. The condition I have set is not to test your worthiness but your commitment. This land demands everything from those who claim its sweat, blood, tears, and an unyielding will. It gives much in return, but only to those who prove themselves faithful. There are those who covet what I have built. They will not make your path easy. Trust few, question everything, and stand your ground. You will find friends where you least expect them and enemies wearing the faces of benefactors. My neighbor to the east, Yates Xavier, is one of the few men in this territory whose word I would trust. If you need assistance, he will provide it honestly. Whatever you decide, Savannah, do so because it is what you want, not what circumstances or others demand of you. That is the only advice I offer, the wisdom earned through a long life of defying expectations. Your Aunt, Savannah Ross. Savannah read the letter twice more, tears blurring her vision. How strange to feel such connection to a woman she'd never met. How remarkable that Alina had somehow known of her disgrace in St. Louis, her refusal to marry the banker's son after discovering his cruelty, the subsequent rumors that had destroyed her reputation and forced her departure. She folded the letter carefully and tucked it into her bodice, close to her heart. Tomorrow, she would see her inheritance. Tomorrow, she would begin to decide her future. True to Jenkins' prediction, clouds rolled in by late afternoon, and by evening rain lashed against the windows of the hotel. Savannah ate a solitary dinner in the small dining room, aware of curious glances from the few other guests. As she finished her meal, the front door burst open, bringing with it a gust of wind, rain, and Yates Xavier. He removed his dripping hat, nodded to Mrs. Holloway, and then noticed Savannah. Something like pleasure flickered across his face as he approached her table. "Miss Ross," he said. "Glad to see you found accommodation." "Thanks to your recommendation," she replied, gesturing to the chair across from her. "Please join me if you'd like." Yates hesitated only briefly before sitting. "You visited Harrington today," he said. It wasn't a question. Savannah raised an eyebrow. "Word travels fast." "It's a small town," he said, echoing Jenkins' earlier words. "You're the most interesting thing to happen here in months." "Lucky me," she said dryly. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You planning to see the homestead tomorrow, weather permitting?" Yates glanced toward the window where rain continued to pour. "It'll clear by morning. I could take you there if you'd like. I'm heading that direction anyway." Savannah studied him, remembering her aunt's words about trust. "That's very kind, but I wouldn't want to impose." "No imposition." He met her gaze directly. "Your aunt was a good neighbor to me when I first arrived. Least I can do is return the favor." There was something in his manner and openness, a lack of artifice that Savannah found refreshing after the calculated interactions of St. Louis society. "Thank you," she said. "I accept." "I'll meet you here at 8, he said, rising. "Bring warm clothes. The mornings are still cold this time of year." After he left, Mrs. Holloway approached, coffee pot in hand. She refilled Savannah's cup without asking. "Yates Xavier's a good man," she said conversationally. "One of the few in these parts. You seem to think highly of him." Mrs. Holloway's stern face softened slightly. "He helped my son when no one else would. 3 years back, my Thomas got caught up with a bad crowd, ended up in debt to some unsavory characters. Yates paid what he owed, then gave him honest work until Thomas got back on his feet." She poured herself a cup and sat in the chair Yates had vacated. "Now my boy's foreman at a ranch up in Montana, got a wife and baby. Wouldn't have any of it if not for Yates." Savannah was touched by the woman's unexpected openness. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're weighing who to trust in a town full of strangers," Mrs. Holloway said bluntly. "And because those railway men who rode in today have been asking about you." A chill ran down Savannah's spine. "What did they want to know?" "Everything. When you arrived, where you're staying, if you've been to see the lawyer." Mrs. Holloway's mouth tightened. "I told them it's not my business to discuss my guests. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. They'll find you soon enough." The older woman stood. "Just remember, not everyone who offers help has your best interests at heart." With that cryptic warning, she returned to the kitchen, leaving Savannah alone with her thoughts and the drumming of the rain. True to Yates's prediction, morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having washed everything clean. Savannah dressed in her sturdiest skirt and boots, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the morning chill. When she came downstairs, Yates was already waiting, talking quietly with Mrs. Holloway. "Morning," he said, tipping his hat. "Ready to see your inheritance, as ready as I'll ever be." Savannah accepted the bundle Mrs. Holloway pressed into her hands, biscuits wrapped in a cloth napkin. "For the road," the older woman explained. Outside, 2 horses waited Yates's chestnut stallion and a dappled gray mare. Savannah approached the mare cautiously. It had been years since she'd ridden, her father having sold their horses after falling on hard times. "She's gentle," Yates assured her, giving the mare a fond pat. "This is Macy. Belonged to your aunt, actually. Been boarding her at my place since Alina took ill." Savannah stroked the mare's velvet nose, oddly touched that her aunt had thought to provide even this. "Hello, Macy," she murmured. Yates helped her mount, then swung easily onto his own horse. They rode out of town at a leisurely pace, the morning air crisp and sweet after the rain. "How long did you know my aunt?" Savannah asked as Wilson fell behind them. 8 years, Yates replied. "I came to Wyoming after the war, looking for a fresh start. Your aunt sold me my land when no one else would deal with a man who'd fought for the Union. She supported the Union cause. Alina supported people making their own choices, even unpopular ones." Yates looked over at her. She had strong opinions about everything, but she respected folks who stood by their convictions. They rode north through rolling grasslands, wildflowers nodding in the breeze. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still snow-capped even in late spring. The beauty of it caught Savannah by surprise, so different from the crowded streets and smoke-filled skies of St. Louis. "It's magnificent," she said softly. "That it is." Yates's gaze swept the horizon. "There's a freedom here you don't find back east, space to breathe, to be who you really are." "Is that why you stayed? For the freedom?" He considered her question seriously. "Partly, and partly because I found purpose here, building something with my own hands, watching it grow. There's satisfaction in that." They crossed a shallow stream, water sparkling in the sunlight. Beyond it, the terrain rose slightly, and as they crested a gentle hill, Yates pulled his horse to a stop. "There it is," he said. "Alina's place." Savannah reined in beside him, her breath catching in her throat. Below them spread a small valley, sheltered on 3 sides by low hills. A creek wound through it, bordered by cottonwood trees just coming into leaf. In the center stood a cabin not large but solidly built, with a covered porch and a stone chimney. Nearby was a barn, a chicken coop, and what looked like a small vegetable garden. Horses grazed in a fenced pasture, and cattle dotted a meadow beyond. It wasn't grand or imposing. Yet there was something about the homestead that spoke of care, of deliberate choices, of a life lived on one's own terms. Savannah felt an unexpected tightness in her chest. "It's lovely," she said finally. Yates nodded. "She built all of it herself with a little help from neighbors, started with just the cabin, added the rest over the years." He urged his horse forward. "Come on, I'll show you around." As they rode down into the valley, Savannah tried to imagine her aunt here, a woman alone, carving a life from wilderness. What courage that must have taken, what determination. For the first time, she felt a true kinship with this unknown relative. The cabin was simple but well-maintained. 2 rooms, a main living area with a stone fireplace and a smaller bedroom. The furniture was handcrafted, solid and functional. Books lined a shelf: history, philosophy, practical guides to farming and animal husbandry. A rocking chair sat by the hearth, a half-finished piece of knitting still in a basket beside it. Savannah touched the knitting needles, the wool rough against her fingertips. Here was evidence of a life interrupted, of plans left unfulfilled. "She was making a blanket," Yates said from the doorway. "Said it was for when winter comes. She knew she wouldn't live to see another winter." Alina was realistic about death. Said it was just another journey. He stepped inside. "She'd be pleased you came." Savannah moved to the single window, looking out at the land that could be hers. "The railway wants to buy it." Yates's expression hardened. "They want to buy everything between here and the mountains. Been offering cash, making threats when cash doesn't work. Threats. Nothing they'd admit to in court. Cattle disappearing, wells mysteriously going dry, accidents. His mouth set in a grim line. They made your aunt an offer too. She refused. Is that why the will has conditions? To prevent me from selling, likely. Alina was determined to keep this land out of their hands, said some things are worth more than money. Savannah turned from the window. What would you do if you were me? Yates considered the question carefully. Can't answer that. It's your decision, your life. But you have an opinion. I think this land has a soul, he said finally. And I think it recognized something in your aunt, a matching stubbornness, maybe. His blue eyes met hers. Question is, does it recognize the same in you? The question hung between them, unanswered. Savannah felt the weight of it, the challenge implicit in his words and in her aunt's bequest. Did she have the courage to claim this life with all its hardships and uncertainties? I need time to think, she said. Yates nodded. Of course. He moved toward the door. I'll show you the rest of the property. The barn was well organized, tools hanging in neat rows. The chicken coop housed a dozen fat hens that clucked indignantly at their intrusion. The garden was already sprouting early vegetables, peas climbing trellises, lettuce forming green rosettes, onions pushing up slender shoots. Your aunt planned everything carefully, Yates explained as they walked. Knew exactly when to plant, when to harvest. Taught me a lot when I first arrived, green as spring grass. You were friends, Savannah observed. She didn't have many friends by choice, but yes, I'd like to think we were. He led her to the corral where the horses had gathered, curious about the visitors. These are yours now, too. Good stock. Alina was particular about her breeding program. A black gelding approached, pushing his nose against Yates's shoulder in greeting. This one's Thunder, your aunt's favorite, stubborn as she was but loyal to the bone. Savannah reached out, letting the horse sniff her hand. They all seem well cared for. Your aunt's neighbor to the north, Charlie Martinez, has been looking after them since she took ill. Good man, Charlie. His wife brings food over every Sunday, more than any one person could eat. It sounds like she had a community, despite living alone. Out here, neighbors matter. Distance makes the connection stronger, not weaker. Yates leaned against the fence. It's not an easy life, but it's a good one. Honest work, honest people, most of them anyway. They spent the rest of the morning exploring the property, the creek with its clear, cold water, the south pasture where wildflowers grew in profusion, the stand of pines that provided shelter from winter winds. Everywhere, Savannah saw evidence of careful stewardship, of someone who loved the land and understood its rhythms. By midday, they returned to the cabin. Yates built a small fire in the hearth while Savannah explored the kitchen, an iron stove, shelves of preserved foods, herbs hanging from the rafters. There's coffee, Yates called from the main room. Top shelf in the pantry. Alina always kept a good supply. Savannah found it and prepared a pot, the familiar routine calming her thoughts. They ate Mrs. Holloway's biscuits with honey from a stone crock, sitting at the simple wooden table. What will you do if I decide to stay? Savannah asked suddenly. You said the railway wants all the land between here and the mountains. That includes yours. Yates set down his coffee cup. I'm not selling. This land is my future, my legacy. Even if they threaten you too, especially then. His jaw tightened. I didn't survive Antietam and Gettysburg to be bullied by men in fancy suits. Something in his tone, the quiet determination, the underlying steel resonated with Savannah. It reminded her of herself, of the moment she'd decided to leave St. Louis rather than compromise her principles. My aunt's letter mentioned you, she said. Said you were one of the few people she trusted. Surprise flickered across his face. She wasn't one for easy trust, neither am I. He studied her for a moment. What happened in St. Louis, Savannah? The sudden question caught her off guard. What makes you think something happened? People don't usually leave civilization for wilderness unless they're running towards something or away from something. Savannah considered deflecting, giving the sanitized version she'd prepared. Instead, surprising herself, she told the truth. I was engaged to Edward Blackwell, the son of the most prominent banker in St. Louis. A good match, everyone said. Respectable, secure. She stared into her coffee, seeing the past. I didn't love him, but my father was ill, our finances precarious. Edward seemed kind enough, and I thought I could make a life with him. Yates waited silently as she gathered her thoughts. One night, I went to his office to surprise him. I heard him in the back room with a young woman, one of the secretaries. She was crying, begging him to leave her alone. He was. Savannah's hands tightened around her cup. He was hurting her, forcing himself on her. You stopped him, Yates guessed quietly. Savannah nodded. I grabbed a letter opener from his desk, threatened to kill him if he didn't let her go. A bitter smile twisted her lips. He was more concerned about his trousers than her tears. What happened to the girl? I gave her money to leave town, start somewhere new. Then I broke off the engagement. Savannah's voice hardened. Edward told everyone I was hysterical, imagining things. His father made sure no one believed my version. The girl's disappearance only confirmed their story that I'd invented a rival out of jealousy. And your father died 3 months later, still believing I'd ruined my life over a misunderstanding. She met Yates's gaze directly. I didn't. I saved it. He held her gaze, something like admiration in his eyes. Your aunt would have approved of your choice. Small comfort when the rest of St. Louis branded me a liar and a jilt. Truth and popularity rarely walk hand in hand. Yates refilled their cups. For what it's worth, I believe you. The simple statement, offered without qualification, touched Savannah deeply. Thank you. They sat in companionable silence, the fire crackling softly until Yates glanced at the window. We should head back soon. It's a fair ride to town, and I don't like the look of those clouds building to the west. Savannah followed his gaze. More storm clouds were gathering over the mountains. Another storm coming, spring in Wyoming. Weather changes faster than a politician's promises. He stood, collecting their cups. Take your time looking around. I'll see to the horses. Alone in the cabin, Savannah ran her fingers over the simple furnishings, trying to feel the presence of the woman who had lived here. What would Alina think of her city-bred niece considering a life on this remote homestead? Would she see potential or merely impractical romanticism? In the bedroom, Savannah opened the cedar chest at the foot of the bed. Inside were quilts, carefully folded, and beneath them, a journal bound in worn leather. She hesitated, then lifted it out, feeling like an intruder but unable to resist the connection to her aunt. The journal's pages were filled with neat handwriting, detailing daily life on the homestead, planting and harvests, weather patterns, births and deaths of livestock. Interspersed were more personal reflections, revealing a sharp mind and a dry wit. Savannah found herself smiling at Alina's tart observations about her neighbors, her unflinching honesty about the hardships she faced, and her evident joy in her independence. Near the back of the journal, an entry caught Savannah's eye. April 15, 1876. Harrington came today with news of my brother Joseph's death. Consumption after a long decline. We had not spoken in 30 years, yet I find grief sits heavy upon me. He leaves behind a daughter, Savannah, now alone in the world. I have instructed Harrington to contact her regarding my property. Joseph may have disowned me for my unwomanly ambitions, but blood remains blood. Perhaps his daughter possesses what he lacked the courage to defy convention. Savannah's eyes filled with tears. Her father had never spoken of his sister except to say she had chosen a shameful, unnatural life. Now she understood. Alina had refused to live by his narrow definition of womanhood, and he had never forgiven her. She carefully returned the journal to the chest and closed it. Outside, she could hear Yates preparing the horses. It was time to go, time to decide. As they rode back toward town, the approaching storm darkened the western sky. Savannah felt its pressure mirrored in her own thoughts, the competing pulls of safety and risk, of the known and the unknown. "What will you do?" Yates asked as they crested the same hill where they had first viewed the homestead. "Have you decided?" Savannah turned in her saddle for one last look at the small valley. "Not yet," she said honestly, "but I'm closer than I was this morning." That evening, the storm broke over Wilson with spectacular fury. Savannah stood at her hotel window, watching lightning fork across the darkened sky. The wind drove rain against the glass in sheets, and thunder rumbled almost continuously. A knock at her door startled her. She opened it to find Mrs. Holloway, a candle in hand. "Storms knocked out the lamps downstairs," the older woman explained. "Thought you might need light." "Thank you." Savannah accepted the candle. "Will it last long, these spring storms?" "Hard to say. Could blow over by morning, could last for days." Mrs. Holloway hesitated. "You saw the homestead today." "Yes, it's lovely. Harder than it looks living out there. Alina made it seem easy, but she was exceptional." The older woman gave her a measuring look. "You thinking of staying?" "I'm considering it," Mrs. Holloway nodded. "You've got her look about you, something in the eyes." She turned to go, then paused. "Those railway men were asking after you again, said they'd call on you tomorrow. Thank you for the warning." Left alone, Savannah returned to the window. The storm matched her turbulent thoughts, memories of St. Louis tangling with images of the homestead, practical concerns wrestling with a growing desire for the freedom her aunt had cherished. By morning, Savannah had made her decision. She rose early, dressed with care in her best remaining dress, and went downstairs to find Mr. Harrington already waiting in the hotel lobby. "Miss Ross," he greeted her. "I hope you're not planning to ride out to the homestead today. The roads will be a mess after that storm." "No, Mr. Harrington. I wanted to speak with you about my aunt's bequest." She gestured to a small table. "May we sit?" They were barely settled when the hotel door opened, admitting 3 men in expensive suits. The tallest, the same man Savannah had noticed from a distance 2 days earlier, removed his hat, revealing silver-streaked dark hair and cold gray eyes. His gaze swept the room, landing on her with predatory focus. "Miss Ross," he approached, smiling with practiced charm. "Maxwell Clark, Western Railway Company. These are my associates, Mr. Simmons and Mr. Doyle." The men behind him nodded curtly. "I was hoping for a word with you." "I'm in a meeting, Mr. Clark," Savannah replied coolly. "This won't take long." Without waiting for permission, he pulled out a chair and sat. His companions remained standing, positioning themselves like sentries. "I understand you've inherited Alina Ross's property." "That's correct. Our company has been interested in that land for some time." "Your aunt was resistant to progress. I hope you'll prove more reasonable." He removed a folded document from his jacket. "We're prepared to offer you $1,000, cash, today." It was a significant increase from the previous offer, enough to start a comfortable life almost anywhere. Savannah felt Harrington shift beside her, clearly impressed by the sum. "That's very generous," she said carefully. Clark's smile widened, revealing 2 perfect teeth. "We believe in fair compensation. The papers are ready. You could leave on tomorrow's stage with the money in hand." "And what would become of the homestead?" progress, Miss Ross. A railway that will connect this backward territory to civilization. His tone suggested he was offering her a favor rather than trying to acquire her property. Your aunt's quaint lifestyle was admirable in its way, but surely you can see the future lies in development. Savannah folded her hands on the table, her decision crystallizing in the face of his condescension. Mr. Clark, I appreciate your offer, but I must decline. His smile faltered. Perhaps you misunderstood the amount. $1,000 is a considerable sum. The amount is clear. My answer is no. Clark's pleasant facade slipped, revealing something harder beneath. Miss Ross, let me be frank. That land will be part of our railway one way or another. I'm offering you a chance to profit from the inevitable. Is that a threat, Mr. Clark? A reality? Women alone in this territory face difficulties. Accidents happen. Property changes hands. He leaned forward. Take the money, return to civilization where you belong. Harrington cleared his throat nervously. Perhaps you should consider the offer, Miss Ross. It is most generous. Savannah stood, drawing herself up to her full height. My aunt built something valuable, Mr. Clark, and it's not for sale, not at any price. She turned to Harrington. I'll be claiming my inheritance, Mr. Harrington. Please prepare the necessary papers stating my intention to fulfill the conditions of the will. Clark's face darkened. You're making a mistake. The only mistake would be allowing bullies to determine my future. Savannah met his gaze steadily. Good day, gentlemen. As she walked away, she heard Clark mutter to his companions, Find Xavier. He must know something about her. The mention of Yates sent a chill through her, but Savannah kept walking head high. She had made her choice now, she would have to live with it. The next week passed in a whirlwind of activity. Harrington processed the paperwork for her inheritance, making it official that she was now responsible for the Ross homestead, subject to the 1-year residency requirement. Savannah purchased supplies, hired a wagon to transport her few belongings, and said goodbye to Mrs. Holloway, who surprised her with the gift of a cast-iron kettle. Every home needs a good kettle, the older woman said gruffly, for tea and for company. On her last night in town, Savannah was packing the last of her things when a knock came at her door. She opened it cautiously, half expecting to find Clark or one of his men. Instead, Yates stood in the hallway, hat in hand. Heard you're moving out to the homestead tomorrow, he said. News travels fast, Savannah replied, echoing their earlier exchange with a small smile. Small town. He shifted slightly, seeming uncharacteristically nervous. I also heard about your encounter with Clark. Word is you sent him away with a flea in his ear. I declined his offer. So I gathered. Yates's expression turned serious. Clark doesn't take rejection well, Savannah. He'll make trouble for you. I'm aware of the risk. Are you? He stepped closer, voice dropping. His men have been asking questions about you all over town. And they've been watching my ranch too, ever since they learned I helped you see the property. Concern flickered through Savannah. Have they threatened you? Not directly, not yet. Yates ran a hand through his hair. I'm not worried about myself, but you'll be out there alone. I've been alone before. Not like this. His blue eyes held genuine worry. At least let me help you get settled. I can stay for a few days, make sure everything's secure. Savannah hesitated. The offer was tempting, not just for the practical assistance but for the company. Yet she was wary of creating dependency or expectations. That's kind but unnecessary. I need to learn to manage on my own. Frustration flashed across his face. This isn't about proving something, Savannah. It's about safety. It's about both. She met his gaze steadily. I appreciate your concern, Yates, truly, but I need to do this my way. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. All right, but promise you'll send word if you need help. Day or night doesn't matter, I promise. And take this." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small revolver. "It was your aunt's. She asked me to clean it for her before she passed. Never got the chance to return it." Savannah accepted the weapon, feeling its weight in her palm. Did she use it often? Only when necessary. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. She was a better shot than most men in the territory, said it was because women don't have the luxury of missing. The observation was so perfectly in keeping with what Savannah had learned of her aunt that she couldn't help but smile. "Thank you, Yates." He nodded, then hesitated as if wanting to say more. Instead, he simply said, "Good night, Savannah. I'll see you tomorrow, help you get that wagon loaded." As Savannah lay in bed that night, sleep eluded her. The revolver sat on the bedside table, a tangible reminder of the challenges ahead. Was she foolish to attempt this? To choose isolation and hard work over the security Clark's money could have provided? Yet when she closed her eyes, it was the homestead. She saw the cabin with its sturdy walls, the creek sparkling in sunlight, the mountains standing guard in the distance. And somewhere, she imagined, her aunt's spirit watching, waiting to see if she truly possessed the courage to defy convention. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Yates arrived early, helping Savannah load her purchases and the few belongings she'd brought from St. Louis onto a rented wagon. Mrs. Holloway provided a basket of food for your first few days, and even Mr. Harrington appeared briefly to wish her well. By mid-morning, they were ready. Savannah climbed onto the wagon seat, taking the reins of the sturdy draft horse. Yates mounted his stallion alongside. "Last chance to change your mind," he said lightly, though his eyes were serious. Savannah shook her head. "I've made my decision." With a nod, he led the way out of town, riding slightly ahead as they took the northern road. The journey was slow, the wagon heavy with supplies, but Savannah found herself enjoying the rhythm of it, the gradual transition from town to wilderness. They stopped midday by the same stream they had crossed on their first ride to the homestead. While the horses drank, Savannah and Yates shared a simple meal from Mrs. Holloway's basket. "Clark left town yesterday," Yates mentioned as they ate, "headed east supposedly to meet with investors. But his men stayed behind, 2 of them. Doyle's been spending a lot of time at the saloon asking questions about you." Savannah frowned. "What kind of questions? If you're really Aliner's niece, if anyone knows you from back east, if you've got a man in your life?" Yates's jaw tightened. "They're looking for leverage." "They won't find any. My past in St. Louis is scandal enough but hardly secret. Just be careful, Savannah. Men like that don't give up easily." They resumed their journey, the wagon creaking over the uneven terrain. By late afternoon, they crested the final hill, and the homestead came into view. Despite having seen it before, Savannah felt a rush of emotion. This was hers now, her responsibility, her opportunity. Yates helped her unload the wagon, carrying supplies into the cabin and stacking firewood by the door. He checked the barn, the chicken coop, the corral, making sure everything was in order. "The well's good," he reported. "Water's clean, plenty of feed for the livestock stored in the barn. You should be set for at least a month without needing major supplies." Savannah nodded, suddenly overwhelmed by the reality of what she was undertaking. Sensing her mood, Yates paused in his work. Having second thoughts. "No," she said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "Just recognizing the magnitude of the task. You don't have to do everything at once." Yates gestured around them. "Your aunt built this over decades, not days. I know, it's just—" Savannah sought the right words. "In St. Louis, I knew the rules even when I chose to break them. Here, I'm not even sure what they are." Yates considered this. "Out here, the rules are simpler. Take care of your land, your animals, yourself. Help neighbors when they need it. Stand your ground when threatened." He smiled slightly. "Everything else is just details." As the sun began to set, Yates reluctantly prepared to leave. "I should get back to my ranch before dark," he said. "Are you sure you'll be all right?" "I'll be fine," Savannah assured him more confidently than she felt. He hesitated. "I could stay, sleep in the barn." The offer was tempting, but Savannah shook her head. "Thank you, but no, I need to start as I mean to go on." Yates nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I'm just over that eastern ridge if you need anything. Light a signal fire and I'll come." "I doubt it will come to that. Still." He mounted his horse, looking down at her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. "Good night, Savannah. Welcome home." As he rode away, Savannah stood on the porch, watching until he disappeared over the ridge. Then she turned and entered the cabin, her cabin now alone. The first days on the homestead were a steep learning curve. Savannah's city bred hands blistered from chopping wood and carrying water. The chickens seemed determined to hide their eggs in the most inaccessible places. The stove smoked unless the damper was set just right. Each night, she fell into bed exhausted, muscles aching from unaccustomed labor. Yet there was satisfaction in the work too, and the eggs collected despite the hen's best efforts. In the garden rows she weeded under the spring sun, in the fire that finally burned clean and hot in the stubborn stove. Bit by bit, she was learning the rhythms of this new life. On the fourth day, as Savannah was hanging laundry on a line strung between two cottonwood trees, she heard hoofbeats approaching. Hand dropping to the revolver now permanently holstered at her waist, she watched as a rider came into view. It wasn't Yates, as she had half hoped, but a woman perhaps 10 years her senior, sitting astride a pinto pony with practiced ease. She wore a simple dress and a wide-brimmed hat, her dark hair pulled back in a practical braid. "Hello there," the woman called, raising a hand in greeting. "You must be Aliner's niece." Savannah relaxed slightly, though she kept her hand near the revolver. "I am, Savannah Ross." The woman dismounted, leading her pony into the yard. "Sophia Martinez. My husband Charlie and I have the ranch to the north." She extended a hand, which Savannah shook. "I brought you some things. Thought you might be running low on fresh food." From her saddlebags, Sophia produced a cloth-wrapped bundle of fresh bread still warm from the oven, a jar of preserved peaches, and a small wheel of cheese. "That's very kind," Savannah said, genuinely touched by the gesture. Sophia waved away her thanks. "Neighbors look out for each other out here. Your aunt did the same for us many times." She glanced around the homestead appraisingly. "You're settling in all right." "Learning as I go," Savannah admitted. "Best way to learn." Sophia smiled, revealing dimples in her sun-brown cheeks. "Charlie wanted to come himself, but we've got a heifer calving. He'll stop by another time." She hesitated. "We heard about the railway men, that they're giving you trouble." News truly did travel fast in this territory. "They've made an offer for the land. I declined." Sophia nodded approvingly. "Good. Those men are like locusts. They come, they take, they destroy." Her dark eyes flashed with anger. "They tried to force Charlie to sell last year. When he refused, our best bull was found dead. No proof it was them, but—" She shrugged eloquently. "I'm sorry. We survived. We will continue to survive." Sophia's chin lifted defiantly. "But it's better not to face them alone. That's why I came, partly. To invite you to Sunday dinner. It's a tradition your aunt used to join us every week." The invitation touched Savannah deeply. "I'd like that very much." "Good. Come around midday. Charlie will be happy to meet you." Sophia remounted her pony with easy grace. "And if you need anything before then, our place is just over that northern ridge. Follow the creek, you can't miss it." After Sophia left, Savannah brought the food inside, placing it on the table with a sense of growing connection to this place and its people. The isolation she had feared seemed less daunting with neighbors like the Martinses and Yates. The week continued with small triumphs and inevitable setbacks. Savannah managed to repair a broken section of the chicken coop, only to discover the next morning that a fox had found another way in, killing 2 hens. She successfully baked bread in the temperamental oven, then burned a pot of beans when distracted by a stubborn cow that refused to return to its pasture. Through it all, she found herself developing a rhythm rising with the sun, working through the day's tasks, taking moments to simply absorb the beauty of her surroundings. In the evenings, she read from her aunt's books by lamplight, learning about crops and seasons, livestock management, and wilderness survival. And always at the back of her mind was an awareness of Yates over the eastern ridge, close enough to reach if needed, yet respectful of her need to establish herself independently. Sunday arrived clear and warm. Savannah bathed in water heated on the stove, dressed in her second-best dress, and saddled Macy for the ride to the Martinez ranch. Following Sophia's directions, she rode north along the creek, enjoying the way the water sparkled in the morning sun. The Martinez homestead was larger than hers, a 2-story house built of logs and stone, a substantial barn, and multiple corrals where horses and cattle were segregated by age and purpose. A man was working with a young colt in one of the corrals, but he looked up as Savannah approached. Charlie Martinez proved to be a stocky, good-natured man with a ready smile and calloused hands. "Miss Ross," he greeted her, coming to help her dismount. "Welcome. Sophia's been looking forward to your visit." Inside, the house was warm and fragrant with cooking smells. Sophia embraced Savannah like an old friend, drawing her into a kitchen where pots bubbled on a large stove. "Just in time," she said, handing Savannah an apron. "You can help with the tortillas." To Savannah's surprise, they were not the only guests. 2 families from neighboring homesteads arrived shortly after, bringing dishes to contribute to the meal. And then, just as they were preparing to sit down, Yates appeared in the doorway, hat in hand. "Hope I'm not too late," he said, his eyes finding Savannah's across the crowded kitchen. Something warm unfurled in her chest at the sight of him. "Not at all," she said, surprising herself with the pleasure in her voice. The meal was unlike anything Savannah had experienced: abundant food, lively conversation, genuine warmth. Charlie told stories that had everyone laughing, while Sophia ensured no plate remained empty for long. The children of the neighboring families played underfoot, occasionally darting outside to chase each other around the yard. Through it all, Savannah was aware of Yates seated across from her, his blue eyes finding hers whenever the conversation ebbed. There was something comforting in his presence, a steadiness she was beginning to rely upon. After the meal, while the women cleared the dishes, Charlie drew the men outside to look at a new horse he'd acquired. Savannah found herself working alongside Sophia and the other women, accepted without question into their circle. "Your aunt was missed today," one of the women, introduced as Mary Fletcher, remarked as they washed dishes. "She always had the best stories." "And the sharpest tongue," added the other, Sarah Johnson, with a fond smile. "Remember when she told that traveling salesman his hair tonic smelled worse than skunk spray?" They laughed, sharing memories of a leaner that painted a picture of a woman both formidable and beloved. Savannah listened, hungry for these glimpses of the aunt she'd never known. As the afternoon waned, guests began to depart. Savannah thanked her hosts warmly, promising to return the following Sunday. "You don't have to wait for Sunday," Sophia told her, pressing a jar of honey into her hands. "Come anytime." Outside, Savannah found Yates waiting with Macy already saddled. "Thought you might like company on the ride back," he said. They rode side by side, the setting sun painting the landscape in gold and amber. Neither spoke for a time, comfortable in the shared silence. "Thank you," Savannah said finally. "For today, for everything." Yates glanced at her. "I haven't done much. You've made me feel less alone." The admission came easily in the golden light. "Less. Adrift," he nodded, understanding in his eyes. "This land has a way of making you feel both insignificant and essential at the same time. It helps to have people who understand that." They crested a small rise, and their respective homesteads came into view. Savannah's in the valley below, Yates's visible in the distance to the east. For a moment, Savannah saw them as they must appear to others: two people, two properties, separate yet connected by something intangible. "I should tell you," Yates said, breaking into her thoughts. "Doyle was in town yesterday asking more questions about you and about me." Savannah frowned. "What kind of questions?" "Whether we're courting, how often I visit your homestead." His jaw tightened. "They're looking for weaknesses, ways to pressure you." "Let them look," Savannah said with more confidence than she felt. "I'm not selling no matter what they try." Yates studied her, admiration evident in his gaze. "You're a lot like her, you know, your aunt. Same determination." The comparison pleased her more than she would have expected. "I hope I can live up to her example." As they reached her homestead, the sun was just dipping below the western hills. Yates dismounted to help her down, his hands strong and sure at her waist. For a moment they stood close, neither moving away. "Would it be all right if I called on you?" Yates asked, his voice low. "Properly, I mean." The question caught Savannah by surprise, though perhaps it shouldn't have. There had been something growing between them since that first meeting on the road, a connection deeper than mere friendship or neighborly concern. "Yes," she said simply, "I'd like that." A smile spread across his face, genuine and warm. "Good, that's good." He seemed suddenly younger, less certain than the capable rancher she'd come to know. "I should go. Let you get settled for the night." As he mounted his horse, Savannah called, "Yates, be careful if they're watching you too." He nodded, understanding her concern. "Always am. But don't worry about me, Savannah. I've faced worse than railway men with fancy suits." She watched him ride away, a curious mixture of emotions swirling within her: concern, certainly, but also a growing affection she hadn't expected to find in this remote place. The next 2 weeks settled into a pattern. Savannah worked her homestead, gradually growing more confident in her abilities. Yates called every few days, sometimes helping with chores, sometimes bringing small gifts: a book, a seedling for her garden, once a kitten from a litter born in his barn. "For the mice," he explained as the tiny calico explored Savannah's cabin. "Every homestead needs a good mouser." She named the kitten Alina, Ellie for short, and found unexpected comfort in the small creature's presence. The cabin felt less empty with Ellie's purring by the fire each evening. Sophia visited twice, bringing more food and staying to teach Savannah how to make tortillas properly. Charlie stopped by once with a repaired plow blade Savannah hadn't even realized needed fixing. "Your aunt asked me to look after it before she passed," he explained with a shrug. "Just getting around to it now." These small kindnesses, these connections, made the homestead feel increasingly like home. Yet Savannah remained aware of the railwaymen's interest. Twice she spotted riders watching from a distance, disappearing when she reached for her aunt's revolver. The threat remained abstract until the morning Savannah woke to find her garden destroyed, tender plants uprooted, carefully tended rows churned into mud. Boot prints and hoof marks told the story clearly. Someone had deliberately trampled the fruits of her labor. Anger burned through her initial shock. This petty destruction was meant to frighten her, to make her feel vulnerable. Instead, it hardened her resolve. She was replanting what could be salvaged when Yates arrived, his face darkening at the sight of the damage. "When did this happen?" he demanded, kneeling beside her in the mud. "Sometime in the night." Savannah pushed a tomato seedling into the soil with perhaps more force than necessary. "I didn't hear anything." Yates examined the boot prints, his expression grim. "Two men came from the west, left the same way." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "This is just the beginning, Savannah. They're testing your resolve. Then they'll find it stronger than they expected." She sat back on her heels, dirt streaking her hands and face. "I won't be bullied off my land." Admiration and concern warred in Yates's gaze. "No, I don't imagine you will." He hesitated. "But you shouldn't be alone right now. Let me stay, at least for a few days. I can sleep in the barn." Savannah considered refusing, pride warring with practicality, but the boot prints in her garden were a stark reminder of vulnerability. "All right," she agreed, "but just until we're sure they won't return." Yates nodded, relief evident in his posture. "I'll ride back to my place for some things and let my foreman know where I'll be." That night, knowing Yates was nearby in the barn, Savannah slept more soundly than she had since arriving at the homestead. His presence provided security, yes, but also a companionship she hadn't realized she'd been missing. Days passed without further incident. Yates split his time between her homestead and his own ranch, always returning by nightfall. They fell into an easy routine, working separately during the day, sharing meals in the evening. Savannah found herself looking forward to those quiet dinners, to the conversations that stretched late into the night. They spoke of their pasts, Yates's childhood in Pennsylvania, his service in the Union Army, his journey west seeking something he couldn't name. Savannah shared stories of St. Louis, of her father's failed business ventures, of her own dreams deferred by circumstance. "I used to want to teach," she admitted one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sun set. "I had an offer from a girls' school in Boston, but my father was already ill. I couldn't leave him." "Do you regret it?" Yates asked. Not going, Savannah considered the question seriously. "I regret the necessity of the choice, not the choice itself. He was my father despite his flaws." Yates nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Family complications." "What about you?" Savannah asked. "Any regrets?" He was silent for a long moment, staring at the darkening horizon. "I regret some things I did during the war. Necessary things, maybe, but still." He shook his head. "And I regret not making peace with my brother before he died. He fought for the Confederacy." We never spoke again after Gettysburg. Savannah reached over, covering his hand with hers. They sat that way as the first stars appeared, connected by touch and by the shared weight of past choices. The week passed in similar fashion, work during the day, conversation in the evenings. Without discussing it, both seemed to recognize that something was changing between them, deepening beyond friendship into territory neither had anticipated. On the fifth night, as they finished a simple supper, Yates cleared his throat. "I should probably return to my own place tomorrow," he said. "No sign of trouble, and I've been neglecting my own responsibilities." Disappointment flared in Savannah, sharper than she'd expected. "Of course, you've been more than generous with your time." "It's not about generosity, Savannah." His blue eyes held hers across the table. "I've enjoyed being here, with you." The admission hung between them, honest and unadorned. Savannah felt a flush rise to her cheeks. "I've enjoyed it too," she said softly. Yates reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. "I meant what I said about calling on you, properly. If that's still something you'd welcome." "It is." Savannah turned her hand to clasp his. "Very much so." The moment was interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. They exchanged startled glances. It was fully dark outside, well past the hour for social calls. Yates rose, gesturing for Savannah to stay seated. He drew his revolver before approaching the door. "Who's there?" "Charlie Martinez," came the reply. "Got news you need to hear, Yates." Yates opened the door, holstering his weapon as Charlie stepped inside. The rancher was dusty from riding, his expression grave. "Sorry to intrude," he said, nodding to Savannah, "but this couldn't wait." He turned to Yates. "Your ranch house was burned to the ground this afternoon. My oldest boy spotted the smoke and rode over, but it was too late." Savannah gasped, rising to her feet. "Was anyone hurt?" Charlie shook his head. "Foreman and hands were out working cattle. Place was empty." He met Yates's gaze directly. "This wasn't an accident, friend. Martinez found coal oil cans near the back door." Yates's face hardened, a muscle ticking in his jaw. "Railway men. That would be my guess." Charlie removed his hat, turning it in his hands. "There's more. They left a message nailed to a tree, said next time it might not be an empty house." The threat hung in the air, its implications clear. Savannah moved to Yates's side instinctively. "You need to go to the sheriff," she said, fear for him overriding all other concerns. Yates's laugh held no humor. "Sheriff Davis won't cross the railway. He likes his position too much." He turned to Charlie. "What about the hands, the livestock?" "Hands are camping with the herd for now. Martinez is keeping an eye on things." Charlie put his hat back on. "I need to get back, but I wanted you to hear it from me first." "Thank you, Charlie." Yates clasped the other man's hand firmly. "I owe you." "Neighbors," Charlie said simply, as if that explained everything. In this territory, perhaps it did. After Charlie left, silence filled the cabin. Savannah watched Yates, concern tightening her chest. His face was impassive, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the controlled fury in his eyes. "Yates," she said softly, not sure what comfort she could offer. He turned to her, his expression softening slightly. "I'm all right. It's just a house, can be rebuilt. But it was your home." "A home is more than walls and a roof." His gaze held hers. "I've learned that recently." The warmth in his voice touched something deep within her. Without conscious thought, Savannah moved closer, her hand coming up to rest against his cheek. Yates went still, his eyes never leaving hers. "Stay here," she said. "Not just tonight, as long as you need." His hand covered hers, holding it against his face. "Savannah," he murmured, her name a question and an answer both. She wasn't sure who moved first, but suddenly they were kissing tentatively at first, then with growing certainty. His arms came around her, strong and secure, as her hands slid up to his shoulders. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Yates rested his forehead against hers. "I didn't come here intending this," he said quietly. "You should know that. I do." Savannah smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in months despite the threats surrounding them. "Just as you should know I'm not in the habit of kissing men on my porch." A smile curved his lips. "Good to know." He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch gentle. "We'll figure this out, Savannah. All of it." She nodded, believing him despite the challenges they faced. Whatever came next, railway men, rebuilding, the uncertain future, they would face it together. The next morning they rode to Yates's ranch to assess the damage. The sight was worse than Savannah had imagined, the house reduced to charred timbers and ash, outbuildings damaged but still standing. The message Charlie had mentioned was still there, crude letters carved into a tree. "Next time they won't all be empty." Yates surveyed the destruction with a controlled anger that was somehow more frightening than any outburst would have been. "They think this will make me sell," he said, his voice flat. "They're wrong. They spent the day salvaging what could be saved, Yates's foreman and hands returning to help." The mood was grim, but determined. These men clearly respected Yates, following his lead without question. As they worked, Savannah learned more about Yates from his interactions with his men. He knew each by name, asked after families, shared the physical labor equally. This was not a man who commanded respect through fear or position, but through genuine concern and shared purpose. By sunset, they had sorted through the ruins and made temporary arrangements for the hands. Yates would stay with Savannah, while the men would rotate between camping with the herd and staying in the undamaged bunkhouse. "We'll start rebuilding as soon as we can order lumber," Yates told them. "Meanwhile, keep your eyes open. These men won't stop with one fire." As they rode back to Savannah's homestead, both were quiet, lost in thought. The reality of their situation, two people defying a powerful company with apparently few scruples, weighed heavily. "Maybe we should both sell," Savannah said suddenly. "Take the money and start somewhere else, somewhere safe." Yates reined his horse to a stop, turning to face her. "Is that what you want?" She considered the question honestly. "No," she admitted, "but I don't want anyone to get hurt either. Today it was an empty house, tomorrow." "We can't let fear dictate our choices," Yates said firmly. "That's exactly what they want. But we need to be realistic. We're two people against a railway company. We're more than that." Yates gestured toward the Martinez ranch, just visible in the distance. "We have neighbors, community. That's something Clark and his kind don't understand about this territory." Savannah wanted to believe him, but doubt lingered. "What if it's not enough? Then we'll find another way." His gaze held hers, steady and certain. "But I won't be driven off my land, Savannah. And I don't think you want to be either." She sighed, acknowledging the truth of his words. "No, I don't. This place, it matters. What my aunt built here matters." Yates reached across the space between them, taking her hand. "Then we stand our ground, together." The word "together" settled something within Savannah. Whatever came next, she was no longer facing it alone. The following days brought no further incidents, but tension remained high. Yates divided his time between Savannah's homestead and the remains of his ranch, beginning the process of rebuilding while maintaining vigilant watch for any sign of the railway men. Word of the fire spread quickly through the scattered community. Neighbors arrived with offers of help: the Martinezes, the Fletchers, the Johnsons, and others Savannah was just getting to know. They brought food, building materials, extra hands for labor. "This is how we survive out here," Sophia explained as she helped Savannah prepare a meal for the men working on Yates's new house. Together, or not at all. A week after the fire, as Savannah was hanging laundry, she spotted a cloud of dust on the road from town. Soon a wagon came into view, driven by none other than Mrs. Holloway, with Mr. Jenkins from the general store beside her. "Brought you some supplies," Mrs. Holloway announced as she climbed down from the wagon with surprising agility. "Heard about the trouble." Jenkins began unloading crates: canned goods, flour, coffee, ammunition. "On credit," he said when Savannah protested. "Pay when you can." Mrs. Holloway pulled Savannah aside while Jenkins continued unloading. "Those railway men are back in town," she said in a low voice. "Clark returned yesterday in a foul mood. Been closeted with the sheriff most of the day. You know what they're planning?" "No, but it can't be good." The older woman's face was grim. "They've hired some rough types, men I don't recognize, gunslingers by the look of them." Fear coiled in Savannah's stomach. "Thank you for the warning." Mrs. Holloway squeezed her arm. "You and Yates watch yourselves, and know that you have friends in town, even if some are afraid to show it openly." After they left, Savannah relayed the information to Yates when he returned that evening. His expression darkened. "Hiring gunmen means they're escalating," he said. "We need to be prepared." That night, after a simple dinner, Yates taught Savannah how to use her aunt's revolver properly, how to aim, how to control her breathing, how to stand for maximum stability. "I hope you never need to use it," he said as she practiced aiming at a tree stump. "But if you do, don't hesitate. Shoot to stop them, whatever that takes." The lessons continued over the next few days, interspersed with the normal routine of homestead life. Spring was advancing rapidly, the days growing longer and warmer. Despite the threat hanging over them, there was joy in watching crops emerge, in seeing calves frolic in the pasture, in the simple rhythm of work shared. And there was joy, too, in the deepening relationship between Savannah and Yates. Each evening brought them closer conversations by firelight, touches that lingered, kisses that grew more confident. They were careful not to rush, both aware of the permanence they were building between them. "I never expected to find this," Yates admitted one night as they sat on the porch, watching a full moon rise over the eastern ridge. "When I came west, I was running from memories, not looking for a future." "And now?" Savannah asked, her head resting against his shoulder. His arm tightened around her. "Now I can't imagine a future that doesn't include you." The words, simple and direct, filled a space in Savannah's heart she hadn't realized was empty. "Nor I you," she whispered. They were interrupted by the distant sound of hoofbeats. Both tensed, instantly alert. Yates stood, drawing his revolver in one smooth motion. "Get inside," he said quietly. "Lock the door." "I'm not hiding," Savannah replied, retrieving her own weapon from where it hung by the door. Yates glanced at her, a mixture of exasperation and pride in his expression. "At least stay on the porch in the shadows." The riders approached slowly, three men, their forms gradually becoming visible in the moonlight. Savannah recognized the central figure even before he spoke. Maxwell Clark. "Evening, Xavier," Clark called, reining his horse to a stop a cautious distance from the cabin. "Miss Ross." The two men flanking him remained silent, their hands resting near holstered guns. "You're trespassing, Clark," Yates said, his voice even but with an edge of steel. "Just paying a neighborly visit." Clark's smile was cold in the moonlight. "Thought we should talk after the unfortunate accident at your ranch." "Nothing unfortunate about arson," Savannah said, stepping forward despite Yates's warning glance. "Or about threats." Clark turned his attention to her. "Miss Ross, I'm simply a businessman trying to complete a necessary transaction. The railway must go through for the good of the territory." "Then route it elsewhere," Yates suggested. "Plenty of land to the west." "The engineers have determined this is the only viable route." Clark's tone suggested the matter was settled. "I came to make a final offer before things become more difficult." "We're not selling," Savannah said firmly. "Not now, not ever." Clark sighed as if disappointed in unreasonable children. $2,000, each, cash tonight. You could be on the morning stage, start fresh anywhere you choose." He spread his hands. "This is my final offer. I strongly suggest you accept it." Savannah exchanged a glance with Yates, seeing her own resolve mirrored in his eyes. "The answer is still no," she said. "Then you leave me no choice." Clark nodded to his companions. "Remember, you chose this path." As they turned to ride away, one of the gunmen called back, "Sleep light, Xavier. Never know when another fire might start." Yates's hand tightened on his revolver, but he made no move to follow as the three riders disappeared into the night. "They'll be back," Savannah said, the reality of their situation settling like a stone in her stomach. "And not for conversation." "Yes." Yates holstered his weapon, his face grim in the moonlight. "We need to prepare." The next day they rode to the Martinez ranch to share news of Clark's visit. Charlie listened grimly, then made a decision. "You both stay here tonight," he said. "Sophia and the children too. I'll send word to the Fletchers and Johnsons. We'll gather everyone in one place where we can defend them if necessary." By nightfall, 3 families had arrived at the Martinez Ranch: the Fletchers with their 4 children, the Johnsons with their elderly father, and the Wilsons, a young couple from the newest homestead to the west. Safety in numbers, Charlie explained as Sophia organized sleeping arrangements. And this way, we know where everyone is. The night passed without incident, but tension remained high. At dawn, the men organized into pairs to check each homestead, finding nothing disturbed. The families returned to their homes cautiously, agreeing to gather again at the first sign of trouble. The pattern repeated for 3 days, gathering at the Martinez Ranch by night, returning to their homesteads by day. On the 4th morning, as Savannah and Yates rode back to her cabin, they spotted smoke rising from the valley. "No," Savannah whispered, urging Macy into a gallop. They crested the hill to find the barn in flames, the fire already spreading to the nearby chicken coop. The cabin, further away, was untouched so far, but it was only a matter of time if the fire continued unchecked. Without hesitation, both dismounted and ran toward the blaze. Yates grabbed buckets while Savannah began pumping water from the well. They worked frantically, joined minutes later by Charlie and 2 other men who had seen the smoke. Despite their efforts, the barn was lost, collapsing in a shower of sparks and burning timber. They managed to save the chicken coop and prevent the fire from reaching the cabin, but the cost was high. Tools, feed, and 2 horses that had been in the barn were lost. As they stood amid the smoking ruins, exhausted and soot-covered, Charlie voiced what they all knew. This was deliberate. "Just like your place, Yates." Savannah surveyed the destruction, grief warring with fury. "They think this will break us," she said, her voice rough from smoke. "They're wrong." That night, as they gathered once more at the Martinez Ranch, a new plan began to form. If the railway men would not respect the law, perhaps it was time to create consequences they would understand. "We can't just wait for them to destroy everything we've built," Sarah Johnson argued. "We need to take the fight to them." "I agree," Charlie said, "but we need to be smart about it. Direct confrontation with hired guns is a good way to get killed." "What about the investors?" Yates suggested. "Clark answers to someone. If we could reach them, show them what their representative is doing." The idea took hold. Mr. Fletcher, who traveled occasionally to Cheyenne for business, volunteered to investigate the railway company's structure, to identify the key investors who might be swayed by evidence of Clark's methods. "Meanwhile, we need to protect what's left," Charlie said. "No one stays alone. We rotate guards day and night." The community pulled together in the face of threat, sharing resources, dividing labor, supporting each other. Savannah, who had come west expecting isolation, found herself at the center of a web of connection stronger than anything she'd known in St. Louis. "This is what my aunt understood," she told Yates as they rode back to check her homestead the next day. "Why she stayed, despite the hardships. It's not just the land, it's the people who share it." Yates nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Out here, you learn quickly who you can count on when trouble comes." He reached across to take her hand. "And who you want beside you, whatever comes." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Savannah squeezed his hand, no words necessary to convey her agreement. They crested the hill above her homestead and stopped, staring in disbelief. Where there had been charred ruins of the barn just yesterday, men were now working raising new timbers, hammering, sawing. A wagon loaded with lumber stood nearby, and she recognized many of their neighbors among the workers. "What is this?" she asked, tears springing to her eyes. "Community," Yates said simply. "Charlie must have organized it while we were resting." They rode down to find not only neighbors but townspeople as well. Mr. Jenkins from the general store, Mrs. Holloway's son Thomas, apparently returned from Montana. Even Mr. Harrington the lawyer. Couldn't let those railway bullies win, Jenkins explained as he handed Yates a hammer. Town's finally taking sides. By sunset, the frame of the new barn was complete. Savannah moved among the workers, offering water and thanks, overwhelmed by their generosity. Eleanor would be proud, Mrs. Holloway said, appearing at Savannah's side with coffee for the workers. She always said this territory breeds a special kind of person tough enough to survive alone, smart enough to know when to stand together. That night, as they gathered around fires at the Martinez Ranch, the mood was cautiously optimistic. The show of solidarity had lifted spirits, reminding everyone that they were not, in fact, just scattered individuals against a powerful corporation. Mr. Fletcher returned from Cheyenne 3 days later with valuable information. The railway company's primary investors were Eastern businessmen who valued their reputations highly. They've built their images as philanthropists and civic leaders, he reported. If word got out about burning homesteads and threatening women, their standing would suffer. So we write to them, Sarah Johnson suggested. Tell them what their man Clark is doing. Letters can be ignored, Charlie pointed out. We need something more direct. A representative, Yates said slowly. Someone to travel east and speak to these men personally, with evidence. All eyes turned to Savannah, the most educated among them, the one with connections to Eastern society. Me, she asked, startled. But my homestead will protect it, Charlie assured her. Just as you would protect any of ours. The decision wasn't made lightly. Traveling east would mean weeks away, leaving Yates and her new community to face whatever Clark planned next. Yet the opportunity to strike directly at the railway company's support was too valuable to ignore. That night, alone in the small room Sophia had given them, Savannah and Yates discussed the proposal. I don't want to leave you, she admitted, her head on his shoulder as they lay together. Not with Clark still threatening everything. You'd be doing more good in Boston than here, Yates said, though she could hear the reluctance in his voice. And you'd be safer. I don't care about safety. I care about us, about this place, about what we're building together. Yates propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her in the dim light. Savannah Ross, when you rode into Wilson that day, I never imagined you'd become so essential to my life so quickly. He traced her cheek with gentle fingers. I love you. I think I have from the moment I saw you standing alone on that road, too stubborn to accept help. The words, so simply spoken, filled Savannah with warmth. I love you too, she whispered, which is why the thought of leaving, even temporarily, is so difficult. Sometimes loving someone means doing the hard thing because it's right. Yates kissed her softly. Go to Boston, speak to these men, show them who we really are out here, and then come back to me. Always, Savannah promised. The decision made, preparations moved swiftly. Mr. Fletcher would accompany Savannah as far as Cheyenne, where she would catch the eastbound train. Mrs. Holloway contributed her best traveling dress, while Sophia helped alter it to fit. Charlie and the other ranchers assembled documentation of Clark's actions, sworn statements, descriptions of the fires, even a daguerreotype of the burned barn and the threatening message. The morning of departure arrived all too soon. Savannah stood with Yates at the stagecoach stop in Wilson, acutely aware of the watching eyes of townspeople, some supportive, some wary, some clearly reporting back to Clark. I'll be back as soon as I can, she said, fighting tears. A month, perhaps less. Yates cupped her face in his hands. I'll be waiting, he kissed her, uncaring of the audience. Be careful, Savannah. Clark has connections in the East too. The warning sent a chill through her, but she nodded, determination overtaking fear. I will. You be careful too. Don't take any unnecessary risks. Define unnecessary, he said with a small smile, trying to lighten the moment. the stagecoach arrived in a cloud of dust. Mr. Fletcher loaded Savannah's small trunk, then helped her aboard. As the coach pulled away, Savannah looked back at Yates, tall and steady in the morning light, his blue eyes never leaving hers until distance made him indistinct. The journey east was long and tiring, stagecoach to Cheyenne, then trains through increasingly populated landscapes. Savannah watched as wilderness gave way to farms, towns, cities. By the time she reached Boston, the wide open spaces of Wyoming seemed like a distant dream. Boston itself was overwhelming after months in Wilson, the crowds, the noise, the sheer density of humanity. Savannah checked into a modest hotel, then set about her mission. The railway company's primary investors proved difficult to access. Secretaries and assistants blocked her attempts at direct meetings. Letters went unanswered. Days stretched into a week, then two. Finally, desperation drove Savannah to a strategy she would once have considered beneath her dignity. She attended a charity ball where one of the investors, Harrison Thornfield, was to be honored for his philanthropic work. Dressed in Mrs. Holloway's best, her hair arranged by a hotel maid, Savannah paid an exorbitant sum for a last-minute ticket. Inside the glittering ballroom, she felt acutely out of place, her dress a season out of fashion, her hands bearing calluses from real work, her skin tanned by Wyoming sun. Yet these differences gave her confidence too. She was no longer the sheltered society girl who had left St. Louis. She was a woman who had faced fire and threat, who had built something real with her own hands. She approached Thornfield during a lull in the music, a portly, balding man with an expression of perpetual satisfaction. "Mr. Thornfield, Savannah Ross, I've been trying to reach you regarding the Western Railway Company." His smile dimmed. "Business matters should be directed to my office, Miss Ross. And I've tried your office, sir. They seem remarkably uninterested in discussing how your company is burning homesteads and threatening women in Wyoming Territory." That got his attention, and that of several nearby guests who paused in their conversations. "What nonsense is this?" Thornfield blustered, taking her arm and steering her toward a less populated corner of the ballroom. "Who are you really?" "Exactly who I said. A homesteader whose property your representative, Maxwell Clark, has been trying to acquire through increasingly violent means." Savannah met his gaze directly. "I have documentation, sworn statements and witnesses. All of which I'd be happy to share with the newspapers if you won't hear me privately." The threat of public scandal worked where appeals to conscience had failed. The next morning, Savannah found herself in Thornfield's office, presenting her evidence to him and two other primary investors. "If these allegations are true, they are deeply troubling," said the oldest of the men, a Mr. Bancroft. "However, Miss Ross, you must understand our position. This railway is vital for the development of the Western Territories." "I don't dispute the value of progress, gentlemen," Savannah replied. "But not at the cost of people's homes and livelihoods, not through intimidation and violence." The meeting ended with cautious promises to investigate Clark's methods and consider alternative routes for the railway. Savannah left feeling she had been heard, if not fully believed. That impression changed the next day when she returned to her hotel to find her room ransacked, her documentation missing. The hotel manager was apologetic but unhelpful, suggesting perhaps she had misplaced the papers herself. Savannah knew better. Clark's reach extended further than she had anticipated. Without evidence, her word alone might not be enough to convince the investors. She was considering her options when a bellboy delivered a note. The handwriting was unfamiliar, the message brief. "Central Park, North Fountain, noon tomorrow. Bring what remains of your evidence. A friend." Suspicion warred with hope. Was this a trap or a genuine ally? After careful consideration, Savannah decided to go, but not unprepared. She concealed her aunt's revolver in her reticule, smaller but no less lethal than the one she carried in Wyoming. The meeting place was public enough to provide some safety. Savannah arrived early, positioning herself to observe anyone approaching the fountain. At precisely noon, a woman joined her, elegantly dressed, perhaps 40, with shrewd eyes and a determined mouth. "Miss Ross, I'm Margaret Bancroft, William Bancroft's wife." Surprise rendered Savannah momentarily speechless. This was the last person she had expected. "Thank you for coming, Mrs. Bancroft continued. "I believe your story. More importantly, I have proof that my husband and his associates are already aware of Mr. Clark's methods and have chosen to ignore them." She handed Savannah a small portfolio. Inside were letters between the investors and Clark, clearly acknowledging resistance in the territory and authorizing him to take necessary steps to secure the right-of-way. "Where did you get these?" Savannah asked, stunned by the evidence. "My husband may consider me merely a social ornament, but I take an interest in his business affairs." Mrs. Bancroft's smile held no humor, particularly when they involve matters of conscience. "Why are you helping me?" "Because 20 years ago, I was a young woman whose property and future were considered expendable by men like my husband." Her expression softened slightly. "I chose security over principle. I've regretted it ever since." With Mrs. Bancroft's help, Savannah prepared a new strategy. Rather than appealing directly to the investors again, they would use the letters to approach a prominent Boston newspaper known for its investigative reporting. The story broke 3 days later, a front-page exposé on the Western Railway Company's tactics in Wyoming Territory, complete with excerpts from the damning correspondence. The public reaction was immediate and fierce. The investors' reputations, built on philanthropic works and civic leadership, were suddenly tarnished by association with violence and intimidation. Savannah received a summons to meet with all the primary investors the following day. In a wood-paneled boardroom, she faced the men whose decisions had threatened her home and community. "This is most irregular, Miss Ross," Thornfield began, his face flushed with anger. "These private communications should never have been made public." "Perhaps if you'd acted on my initial concerns, such measures wouldn't have been necessary," Savannah replied calmly. "What do you want?" asked Bancroft directly. He had not looked at his wife, seated quietly in the corner, since entering the room. "I want Clark removed from his position immediately. I want the railway rerouted to avoid existing homesteads. And I want written assurances that no further action will be taken against any of the homesteaders who opposed your original plans." "Impossible," Thornfield sputtered. "The cost of rerouting is considerably less than the cost to your reputations if this story continues to develop," Mrs. Bancroft interjected smoothly. "The public has little sympathy for wealthy businessmen who burn women's homes." The negotiation was tense, but ultimately successful. By evening, Savannah had secured written agreements to all her demands, including the immediate recall of Clark from the territory. "You've won, Miss Ross," Bancroft said as he signed the final document. "I hope you realize the significance of what you've accomplished." "It's not about winning, Mr. Bancroft. It's about justice." Savannah gathered the papers carefully, and about protecting a community that deserves to determine its own future. As she prepared to return to Wyoming, Mrs. Bancroft visited her hotel room one last time. "You're going back," she said, not a question but an observation. "Yes, it's home now, because of the land, or because of the man waiting there." The older woman's perception was unsettling. Savannah smiled. "Both. They've become inseparable in my mind." "Then you're fortunate indeed, Mrs. Bancroft squeezed her hand. "Safe travels, Miss Ross, and should you ever need an ally in Boston again, you know where to find me." The journey west seemed both longer and shorter than the eastbound trip had been, longer in anticipation, shorter in familiarity. When the stagecoach finally rolled into Wilson, Savannah's heart raced at the sight of a familiar figure waiting by the hitching post. Yates looked thinner, more weathered than when she'd left, but his smile at the sight of her was like sunrise after the longest night. "You're back," he said simply as he helped her down from the coach. "I told you I would be." Savannah resisted the urge to throw herself into his arms, aware of the watching townspeople. "Is everyone all right, the homestead? Everyone safe, the homestead standing?" He took her small trunk from the driver, and there's been no sign of Clark or his men for almost a week now. "There won't be," Savannah said with quiet satisfaction. "He's been recalled to Boston, permanently." Yates's eyebrows rose. "You'll have to tell me how you managed that." "I will." "All of it." She glanced around the familiar main street of Wilson, noting curious faces watching their reunion. But not here. They rode out of town together, Savannah on Macy, Yates on his chestnut stallion. As they crested the hill above her homestead, Savannah gasped in surprise. Where there had been a partially rebuilt barn when she left, there now stood a complete structure, freshly painted. The cabin had a new roof and a larger porch. The garden was neatly fenced, plants thriving in orderly rows. "How?" she asked, turning to Yates in wonder. Everyone helped. The Martineses, the Fletchers, even people from town. His expression was a mixture of pride and uncertainty. "I hope you don't mind the changes. I wanted it to be perfect for your return." Savannah blinked back tears. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "More than I could have imagined." As they rode down into the valley, she noted other improvements: a new chicken coop, expanded corrals, a small orchard of saplings planted along the creek. Each detail spoke of care, of investment in a shared future. They had barely dismounted when the cabin door flew open and Ellie the cat darted out, followed by Sophia Martinez. "Savannah," Sophia embraced her warmly. "You're just in time. The welcome home dinner is almost ready." Inside, Savannah found the cabin transformed. New curtains hung at the windows, a colorful quilt brightened the bed, and the aroma of cooking filled the air. A table had been set with mismatched but cherished dishes, enough for many more than the three of them. "Charlie and the children will be here soon," Sophia explained, returning to the stove. "And the others. Everyone wanted to celebrate your return and the good news." Before Savannah could ask what news she meant, the sound of wagons and horses announced the arrival of more visitors. Soon the small cabin was filled with neighbors and friends: the Martineses with their children, the Fletchers, the Johnsons, the Wilsons, Mrs. Holloway, who had made the journey from town specially, Mr. Jenkins, and others Savannah had met only briefly before her departure. They brought food and drink, stories and laughter. The victory over the railway company was toasted repeatedly, with Savannah pressed to share every detail of her confrontation with the investors. "I knew you'd manage it," Mrs. Holloway declared proudly. "Told Yates here not to worry." "She worried plenty," Charlie contradicted with a grin. "Came out to check on the homestead every other day." As the celebration continued, Savannah found herself watching Yates, the way he interacted with their neighbors, the respect in their voices when they addressed him, the easy camaraderie built on shared struggles and mutual support. When the meal was finished and twilight descended, guests began to depart. Each hugged Savannah as they left, welcoming her home with genuine warmth. Finally, only Savannah and Yates remained. She stood on the porch, watching the last wagon disappear over the hill, feeling a profound sense of belonging. "Happy," Yates asked, coming to stand beside her. Very. She turned to him, taking in the beloved features of his face in the fading light. Though I've missed a lot, it seems. All these improvements. We had time while you were fighting our battle in Boston. He gestured toward the new barn. Seemed right to use it to build something better than what was lost. It's perfect, Savannah said softly. All of it. She hesitated. Sophia mentioned good news. What did she mean? Yates took her hand, an uncharacteristic nervousness in his manner. I was going to make this more formal, but... He reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small object. I found this in the ruins of my ranch house. It belonged to my mother. In his palm lay a ring, a simple gold band set with a small sapphire. Savannah's breath caught in her throat. Savannah Ross, Yates said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. When you rode into my life that day on the road to Wilson, I had no idea you'd change everything. How empty this land would seem without you now, how meaningless any success would be if not shared with you. He took her hand, his touch gentle but sure. I love you. Will you marry me? Build a life with me here on this land that brought us together. Tears blurred Savannah's vision, but her voice was clear. Yes, she said simply. Yes to all of it, to every day and every season, to building and growing and facing whatever comes. Together. Yates slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her close. As their lips met, Savannah felt a sense of completion, of coming home in the truest sense, not to a place, but to a person, to a shared future rooted in this wild, beautiful land. Later, as they sat by the fire, plans flowing between them for the wedding, for joining their properties, for the life they would build together, Savannah remembered the words that had first drawn them together. No one came for me, she said softly, thinking of those lonely days in St. Louis after her father's death, the scandal that had driven her west, the stagecoach that had abandoned her on the road to Wilson. Yates drew her closer, understanding in his eyes. I'm here, he replied, his voice a promise, and I always will be. In the flickering firelight, with the vast Wyoming night surrounding their small cabin, Savannah knew it was true. Whatever challenges came, harsh winters, dry summers, new threats from those who saw only resources to exploit rather than a life to cherish, they would face them together, bound by love and by the land that had brought them together. Outside, stars scattered across the endless sky like promises waiting to be kept. Inside, Savannah and Yates planned their future, secure in the knowledge that they had found what many search for but few discover: a true home in a place and in each other. 5 years later, Savannah Xavier stood on the porch of their expanded home, watching her husband return from checking the northern pasture. Their properties had been joined, the original homesteads forming the core of a successful ranch that now employed several hands and was known throughout the territory for its fine horses. In her arms, their 2-year-old daughter, Eleanor Sophia, squirmed impatiently, eager to greet her father. At Savannah's feet, 4-year-old Joseph played with the aging Ellie, now a dignified matron who tolerated the boy's attentions with feline grace. "Papa," Eleanor called, spotting Yates as he rode into the yard. Savannah smiled, watching as Yates dismounted and swept both children into his arms, his laughter mingling with theirs in the clear mountain air. This was the life her aunt had envisioned for her, not an exact replica of Eleanor Ross's solitary existence, but one built on the same foundation of independence, determination, and connection to the land. Wilson had grown in the years since the railway battle, but not in the way Maxwell Clark had envisioned. Instead of a company town dominated by Eastern interests, it had developed according to the needs and values of its residents. The railway eventually came, but on a route that respected existing homesteads and with policies that benefited local businesses. Savannah and Yates had played their part in that development, using her education and his practical knowledge to help shape the territory's growth. They had become leaders in the community, not through seeking power but through demonstrating the strength that comes from standing firm for what matters. As Yates approached with their children, Savannah felt the familiar warmth of gratitude for the aunt who had left her this legacy, for the neighbors who had become family, for the man who had kept his promise to always be there. "Welcome home," she said as she did every evening, the words a renewal of all they had built together. Yates kissed her, their children squirming between them, the Wyoming sun setting behind them in a blaze of color that seemed to promise yet more beauty tomorrow. "Always good to come home to you," he replied, the love in his eyes as steady as it had been on the day they met. Together, they entered the house that had grown from Savannah Ross's simple cabin, a home filled with books and laughter, with memories of struggles overcome and joys shared, with plans for a future as expansive as the territory itself. Outside, the land stretched to the horizon, wild and beautiful and theirs to steward. Inside, the family they had created, bound by choice rather than merely by blood, gathered around the table that had witnessed so many moments of their shared life. This was their legacy, Savannah thought as she watched Yates helping Joseph with his dinner, Alina chattering happily about the butterflies she had seen that day. Not merely the land or the ranch, but the love that had transformed a chance meeting on a dusty road into a life of purpose and belonging. No one had come for her that day long ago, abandoned on the road to Wilson. No one except the one who mattered most, the man who had kept his promise through fire and threat, through change and growth, through all the seasons of their life together. He was here. He always would be. And in that certainty lay the greatest gift of all, a home, in every sense of the word, built on love that had been chosen, tested, and proven stronger than any force that sought to break it.